Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Canadian Awareness Podcast. My name is Anthony. I'm an extra dimensional channeler here in Toronto, Canada. And tonight I have a very special lady, very special guest from Australia. That is Mary Rodwell. Mary is an international speaker who's originally born in the UK, but then resided in Australia for a very long time, since 91. And she's one of the leading professionals in extraterrestrial contact, hybridization programs, including hybrid children, star children, indigo children, and so forth. She's also a founder of an Australian close encounter resource network, or in short term we've known it as ACERN, which was established in 97 to provide professional counseling, support, hypnotherapy, even to individuals with paranormal and extraterrestrial type of experiences and events, including extraterrestrial abductions and those related experiences, but also not just for the individuals, but for their families as well. Mary's worked actually prior to that in private practice as a professional counselor, as well as hypnotherapist. And I watched her twice at Contact in the Desert, 2 different presentations. I own 2 of her books, well written, great research, and also great witness testimonies. She's a producer of a couple different documentaries, so Expressions of Extraterrestrial Contact. Volume 1 is called Visual Blueprint. Second one, Communication and Healing Blueprint, very related to one another. Back in 2004, she's made these. So originally from UK, Mary speaks to us tonight, live from Australia. I bring into the studio now, Mary Rodwell. And now with us, I have Mary Rodwell all the way from Australia, and I'm very honored to have her. I've heard about this lady for a very long time. Mary, what can I say? Welcome to Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Welcome to Canadian Awareness Podcast. How are you today?
Anthony, it's a pleasure, and it's wonderful to talk with you. As you reminded me that we connected a few years ago, so it's wonderful to actually have a bit of time with you today.
Yes, we did. For the audience, we did meet at Indian Wells, California, at the Renaissance Hotel. You were doing a wonderful presentation on your book and different investigative things you've done in your past, in your career. I happened to be there too. I was working with the clients at the time. I was just getting into the channeling industry, and I have the picture here to show you and to obviously show the audience. So this is your stand when you were selling your book, and I believe this is at the moment where I did buy one of your books, the one that you released in 2010. And then I know later on you released the second one, The New Human. That was your second book, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, wonderful. Any new books in the play? Anything we got coming up? Anything I need to pre-order?
Not at the moment. I've been too busy. I've been asked a number of times, but you know that writing a book takes so much time. But I'm also needing to make sure I get the right theme or what it is that I'm guided to do as well. So it's got to be something different, I think.
Absolutely. I do believe you're on a path, and your reputation speaks for itself. That's clear. Even birds in the sky know that. But I've always knew that you were guided by the right people to put the right story out there. And our industry sometimes, as you know, does not wish to hear those deep stories, does not wish to hear that deep investigative information. And as I call galactic, interstellar, cosmic, and universal intelligence, channelers bring some information. Yes, I'm a proud channeler, but I know that you've done phenomenal work in your books. I've got to ask you about books, if you don't mind. Would you be able to tell us, for the audience, The New Human? I mean, I enjoyed that book really well. I read it very carefully. What was the purpose behind you writing that book? What inspired you to do it?
Well, it really started with the first one, which I wrote as a resource book for people having experiences, primarily, Anthony, because so many asked the same questions when they rang me or wanted to talk to me. It's, how do I know this is real? Am I going crazy? It's, what do I do if the children are having experiences? The fear, I'm scared. What do I do about that? And some were getting downloads of information coming out with scripts or languages of different kinds and whatever. So it was a book that was covering the primary questions that those that were having some form of contact wanted. And the thing is, as well as I do, you can't go to a conventional psychologist or psychiatrist with this in most cases, because what that the judgment of that will be, is there something wrong with you? So people are really scared, even though if they really believe they're having a reality, they're scared that if they go and get more information, that they'll end up medicated, etc. So that was why the book was written. It was to give people their own resources and information to connect with information that might help them understand more and validate their own experiences. But the new human was different. The reason I wrote that was I was seeing the intergenerational link going through, that's right, going through families. And that was what I was interested in, because I was getting more and more parents telling me about their children, talking about going through windows, going in a light, and a little guy with big black eyes, teaching them things, showing them things. And many of the children were really relating a connection to these beings. You know, when I got an 8-year-old who was in this very room say to me that his ancestors were the mantis beings, and that when he dies, he's going back to being a mantis. I mean, you know, this is extraordinary when you've got an 8-year-old so clear about his soul origin, and even talked about when he was on board craft, he explained that sometimes he evaporated, he called it, into his mantis form for a while. He would go into a mantis form and then come back into his human form. So we're talking about really deep concepts. And this is a child of 8. So I wanted to bring more of those accounts into the story for people, because not only were they having experiences, but their children were coming out with some extraordinary information, some talking about going to Mars, the children this is, and why they were taken there, and the beings that they connected with and what have you. So to help people understand that it wasn't just them, but it was involving often the whole family, and then wanting to understand how best to help their child. But the interesting thing with all of that, Anthony, was I was connecting it also to the mainstream understanding of these new children coming in, that metaphysically were known as indigos, crystal children, children of light, and all the rest of it, which is very, you know, very much from the spiritual perspective. But mainstream didn't like the differences of these children and created this word dysfunction. There was something dysfunctional about them, because they were more multidimensionally aware. We're seeing auras, seeing energy fields, seeing beings. So they came out with ADHD and Asperger's and dyslexic and what have you. And I like you, I tap into extra help. And I said, well, if they're upgrades, why this apparent dysfunction? And what I got very clearly was they're wired differently, so they won't be programmed into the limited and limiting 3D reality. So the whole idea of them coming in this way was to prevent and to insulate them to a certain extent from the inaccurate programming that we know we're getting from every source of knowledge that we get on this planet. As soon as we're so-called educated, we you know it's what happens. And what do mainstream do? They medicate ADHD to slow them down so that they can be programmed. Whereas in the book, what I did was I looked at the DNA side of it. I got, you know, information that shows how we've been a created species. And not only that there's an upgrade going on, and the upgrades are more multidimensional. And, you know, I've taken in many very credible sources. You know, Dr. Lena Olson's a molecular biologist who's also what she calls a letter person experiencer. And she was saying how we can help these children, not by medicating them, but by giving them the right kind of diet, the right minerals. And they are very low in acetylcholine, for example. She said if you up those doses, it issues. But what we want is a solution that isn't medication, but will enhance and help those that have these different issues by being human and multidimensional at the same time. It also covers not just the way the teachers, certain teachers notice these differences as well. So I brought in educators that could see these differences and what we could do about it. So it was also a self-help book for parents, but also covering the big one that I know you and I are is this whole thing to do with, you know, the you know, the God consciousness or cosmic consciousness. When I had 2 ministers of religion who admitted that the dogma that they had been promoting, they realized had a bigger picture, and it was connected to the stars and our ancestors in the stars. So their complete revision of their own belief system. And I think that's an important one, because I was brought up Catholic, and you know, it's the dogma that holds you into that space that says you can't believe anything outside of that. And so really what we're having to do is challenge that concept that you can't challenge a belief system. Well, yes, you have to. You have to if you want to grow.
And one of the things I find extremely honorable about you, Mary, is the fact that you're not just the person that talks and so forth, but you've written the books, but you've also created a network called Australian Close Encounter Resource Network. And what that does is speaks and communicates and not necessarily heals, but explains to the children why are they having these experiences, but also explains to the parents and the caretakers why are they having these experiences, where are these experiences coming from. And I think it's extremely honorable that you did that. Now, I know that you lived in UK till about 91. You came to Australia 5-6 years later. About 97, you created this network. What was the aim and the mission, aside from what I just said, behind this network? And how do you operate it today? How involved are people with your network?
It's a good question, Anthony. When I first came into this, I thought that such experiences were very rare. But, I'd read Dr. Mack's book, Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, and he wrote that, and Passport to the Cosmos was the second book. Here's a professor of psychiatry at Harvard University saying, I believe they're telling the truth. I believe this is real. He'd done all the psychological testing, which was very powerful for me, because I'm coming from a professional counselling perspective, and and it helped me work through that. Of course, I'd read Whitley Strieber's book Communion, but as I worked with one gentleman who is actually a writer himself now, an author, and he's written his own books about his experiences, I realized that there were so many more, because within a fortnight of meeting him, another one walked through my door having experiences. And then I offered a support group for people, and 12 people turned up. Out of the blue, I had 12. And it was like, hold on a minute. I thought this was supposedly rare, and I'm realizing it's not rare at all. And over those few years, I got to know others. They find you, you know what I mean, Anthony? They sort of find you. And I was doing a few interviews, and I realized that this was much bigger, and lots of support for every other issue under the sun, you know that. And I remember Ellis saying to me, there's support groups for everything, but for this, there's no, they just think you're a loony. They just think you're crazy. So I could say, really, Anthony, it was, the need was there. No one else is doing it. Someone has to do that. And the thing is that even in UFO groups, there's not necessarily the support. They're interested in the craft and what pictures did you take and how many saw it and what date and what time. But those that were having experiences, they didn't often want to look at that, because that was a whole new ball game, looking at people actually having encounters and whatever. And I thought, well, this, I'm a professional. I can offer professional support. And, from that, really, I created ACERN. I thought, well, at least they'll know that they're getting professional counselling. And I also know that even if I didn't do anything at all, just being there to listen and hear them was healing in itself. If I did nothing else, it was giving them validation. And that developed into more than that, because I do hypnotherapy. So if they have missing time, I can take them back to that point. And if they have multidimensional experiences, because of my own experiences, I can actually help them through that as well. How to manage that without being confronted by it, because I ended up, through another synchronicity, learning how to manage my own multidimensional connection and what have you. So from that, I can actually give them tools to manage it so that they don't feel uncomfortable, and have more confidence if they're having downloads, or they're feeling presences, or if they're having information given to them in different ways, whether it's, coming out the star languages and whatever. So in other words, ACERN was, what can I do to help? Give you information, listen, hypnotherapy, and anything else, like other resources, for example. And that's how ACERN really became to be what it is today.
Wonderful. We need more networks like that, Mary, all around, across the world. Brilliant, brilliant. And I know I watched a clip in Caroline Corey's documentary, and she's a wonderful lady as well. I had a chance to meet her and read two of her books. And you stated in that documentary that extraterrestrials, extra dimensionals walk amongst us, part of everyday society. I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely. Would you be able to elaborate based on your statement in Caroline Corey's documentary a little bit more what you meant?
I mean, exactly that we have humanoid non-humans coming from somewhere else, walking amongst us. And I reckon a couple of times I've actually seen one. And it was just because their behavior was a bit unusual. And one was at a conference where there was some lady in front that just behaved really bizarrely. And I just had this real knowing that she was an observer. But there was another one at a post office. And I remember going in there and there was just something about, and you're an intuitive, so you'll know what I mean. There was just something about her energy. And I remember looking at her and thinking, who are you? You know? And she was a worker there, a post office worker. Never saw her again after that. Never. She was gone. So I don't know whether I freaked her out or not. But I've heard of many encounters from people that have said they've met someone that they believe wasn't from here. And so they do walk amongst us. I'm absolutely certain that they monitor what we're doing and what have you. And some have had intimate encounters with them as well. And it's been actually very physical. And one of them is called The Hair of the Alien by, and it was Peter Corey in Sydney, who woke up with a being literally trying to excite him sexually and left 3 hairs, which were analysed and found to be really anomalous afterwards. So there was tangible evidence of what he experienced. He had lots of experiences. And I talk about it in a documentary I was in 2010 called My Mum Talks to Aliens, where I was with my son. That was really highlighting the difficulty between families where you've got someone having experiences, but the rest of the family don't want to hear it or have different beliefs or different views. And I have many cases where the person having the experience is isolated because the partner doesn't want to hear about it, or the relatives think that they're a bit crazy, or nobody wants to hear what's been going on for them. And so they're extremely isolated within their experience, not only because it's different to everyone else, but even their own families struggle to accept them and accept that experience as well. So it's a double isolation, really, that they experience. And I've got many cases like that where they can't go and they can't say, I can't tell my wife about this. She doesn't want to hear it, even though I know she's having experiences or whatever. The kids are having experiences, still can't talk about it. And even though I'm scared for them, there are so many like that where it creates this awful energy in the family because someone is awake to their experiences and others are in denial or don't want to look at it.
That's unfortunate. That's definitely unfortunate. We do live in that environment. It's the society. It's an extremely dense, in a way, it's very primitive, very judgmental, of course, filled with different programmings and conditionings. Third density, what do you expect? So, of course, I mean, I think an entire fleet of crafts can land in someone's backyard and people are still going to say, yeah, no, that's just a bunch of birds or drones. That's a coincidence, you know? You notice how the word coincidence and the word conspiracy theory constantly thrown like a blanket over these things. But that's okay. Everyone's got a right to believe what they wish to believe. And that's all. It's their perspective and it's their free will. Now, I know that you mentioned children. I know you have 3 children, based on my understanding. Are they involved in your work at all?
Not really. My eldest son is a veterinary surgeon, and very scientifically oriented. Although he's been actually very honouring of my work, he'd rather not get involved with it. My daughter's a naturopath, and she actually is very open and has certainly helped a few individuals because she does hypnotherapy as well. And she'll often say, I think you need to see my mum. She'll go, because she's very intuitive and she'll know. And my youngest son, well, he's a musician, but he's very open to it all. You know, he doesn't actually, do anything to work in the same field, being a musician, but he absolutely honors my work and my experiences. The only one that didn't was my former husband, who struggled with Mary being weird and wonderful. So, it's what happens sometimes, isn't it?
That's okay. That's okay. Part of life. That's it. We all have a free will to do whatever we wish to do, and you selected yours, and I admire you for that. And I'll ask you one more question in relation to family. What would you say that for the audience here in Canada? What's one advice that your father Henry or your mom Iris told you that to this day you remember and it means a lot to you?
Well, there were lots of things. My mum was a actress. My dad was a musician as well as working in the rap. I think the thing that I got from them, because my mum ended up doing astrology and teaching herself, was being open. And when I started to talk about other religions apart from Catholicism, because we were brought up as traditional Catholics, my mum said she ended up often going to mass in the morning and a spiritualist church in the evening. And I said, do you think there's any conflict there, Mum? And she said, Mary, it's all God. She said to me, it's all God. It's just a different way of and that stayed with me because it helped me understand that we've all got our own little, what we're comfortable with. But in the end of the day, spirituality is spirituality, and it's all coming from a consciousness and a source. So whatever name you want to give that is actually doesn't matter. It's just honoring the fact we're part of that creativity. And so I think that was probably the most, it's all God.
So, Mary, if I was to, let's say, put you in an elevator in a building, corporate building, and you're in an elevator with a man, and he sees you holding one of your books. Let's say he sees you holding this book, and he looks at the book, and there's a picture of a hybrid child or an extraterrestrial, Zeta Reticuli, and he says to you, oh, you know what, ma'am? None of that stuff is real. You don't actually believe that, do you? What's your answer to this man?
My answer would be, do you honestly believe that we're the only intelligent life in the universe full of billions and trillions of stars? Because if you do, that is totally illogical.
I knew you were going to say something like that, because that would have been my answer too. But I'm asking you questions not because I don't know the answer. I'm asking you questions just to see your perspective and stuff. But you're absolutely right. I think a person has to have an extremely and extraordinarily closed mind and be very ignorant to look at this guy and say, yeah, nope, we're the only ones. Absolutely. Thank you for making me laugh. I guess I should be thanking you then. Yeah. Yeah, I got another question for you. Of this is from my audience. They said that, can you ask Mary, has she ever had an encounter with an extraterrestrial, extra dimensional in any density, in any state? But what would be one that you're willing to talk about, and what did you learn from it?
Well, that's an interesting one, because it brings me back to the surveys that we did with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, where in the surveys of 4,200 people, 75% said their encounters were out of body. 75%. Now, I'm pretty certain that goes for me too. But I will say that I also work with, I call it my non-physical team, where I have been introduced to a number of different intelligences that communicate with me and show me their form. But I don't see them physically. I see them, in my inner eye, if you like. I've also experienced some coming in energetically, so that my consciousness has been moved sideways, and they've come in and they've said what they've needed to say and left, and I've come back. But I have never lost consciousness. I've never been in trance. Most of the time it's like a telephone link, I call it. I ask the question, they give me the answer, and it's in alignment with my 3D. So I move like this. So you would never know they're giving me, it's almost like my little earpiece, giving me a bit of information that I might need to say. You would never know that it's the team, because I would just carry on just like you do, when perhaps you're doing exactly the same thing and they're giving you a bit of information, you just come out with it, and nobody be any the wiser that it's a source that you've connected to. So I would say my team is multidimensional. My team is both physical and interdimensional, and sometimes extra dimensional, I suspect, as well. I get all of that. So for me, it's natural. It's just a part of how I operate. And when I wrote my books, if I needed more information, they would provide it. So if I'm querying something or whatever, and I would then ask for validation, and I would look down and maybe see 11:11 on the clock, or I would get this rush of energy that would say, yeah, that's accurate, that's whatever. So I've learned how to interpret the way I work with my physical body and my spiritual side, to a point where it's in harmony with both. So it's not separate. There's nothing about it that's separate. I know you'll understand that, Anthony.
Yes, of course. I teach classes when it comes to channeling and integration of soul layers to be a channel, to even open up the fourth density conduit between us and third density and the fifth density state, which is physical and deals with all the extraterrestrials in the physical state. So yes, you're absolutely right. You're describing channeling from your own perspective, from your own language, but you're absolutely right. That's exactly what happens. I don't have to meditate for an hour to get an answer. It's a simple shift of focus, shift of energy, and I'll switch and integrate in my fourth density layer and ask any question in English and have a two-way conversation, thank them, and then exit and come back and speak to Mary. So you're absolutely right. I do love speaking to individuals that have an authentic story. I do find you authentic. I've always found you authentic, simply because you don't make your things up. You speak from the heart. You speak how it is. You don't have filtered information. You're a great researcher, and I've always respected you for that, to be honest. This is why I've invited you to come on my show. So thank you again for being here, and thanks for always speaking your truth. It's extremely important. One of the things I never asked you, and honestly, I read your business card like today, and I didn't realize that I have your business card here, and it says you're a Reiki master. I never knew that. I never knew you did Reiki. Would you be able to tell us, for the audience especially, what got you to do Reiki, and do you practice it still?
The answer primarily is that when I worked for 3 years in this particular group of that I learned I actually could be multidimensional when I didn't believe it to start with, because I'm very careful to feel like everything comes with an integrity and it's professional. So I questioned and questioned and questioned, and what we did was something, remote healing, energy work, which was so bizarre at times, where we would pull somebody's energy in, and the group of us would send energy to that particular person. And I wanted to test that out, Anthony, because I'm this kind of person. So at one time I asked, look, can we bring my dad in, because he's got type 2 diabetes and has trouble with his feet. So we all concentrated and put our energy in and whatever. And the next day I phoned my dad in England, and I said, how are you doing, Dad? And he said, oh, not too bad. I said, what's going on then? And I said, and how's your feet? And he said, he says, the last sort of little while they feel so much better. And I said, thank you very much. So I didn't do a traditional thing to start with. Only later I looked at those, because people understand Reiki. They don't understand that you can all heal, and that you only need to call in your help and channel the energy through. And if you're coming from a place of love and compassion, you're going to do the healing. It just happens. But that was something that people recognized, was the Reiki is a recognized thing. So that was why I did it more than anything. Now I don't do so much of that. One of the more weirder things, and I'm ever so glad when people close their eyes, because I work in the energy field, and that looks really weird when I see myself doing all this strange stuff in the energy field. And I remember saying to my team, I said, so what am I doing? I seem to be moving stuff from their energy field and whatever. And they said, imagine the energy field, Mary, around someone with debris from various experiences or mindsets or whatever. He said, like cobwebs. He says, what you're doing is gathering all the cobwebs and you're ridding them from their energy field. So at least I had an explanation of the weird things that I was doing with my hands and all the rest of it. But I say to healers, do whatever feels natural to you, whatever feels comfortable, because that's your way of healing. It doesn't have to be traditional. It doesn't have to be a certain way of doing things, because the more you trust your own source, the more you'll be guided anyway. So that's me and my truth anyway.
Wonderful. And what advice would you give to a parent that has never heard of you, has never seen your books, has no idea who's married Rodwell? But if I was to tell this parent, say, hey, you know what? There's a lady in Australia, and I gave them your story. What advice would you give them to even believe what you have to say? And what advice would you give to a parent that you are able to open up their eyes and give them the intelligence and the information that you've researched tremendously over the years? Basically, that you're able to help them. What would you say to this parent that has a child that's gone through some experiences, visitations at night, beings walking through walls, and so forth? What would you say?
Well, I'd say that all my research has been based not only on people's experience, but also many of those that I've supported have included psychiatrists, doctors, nurses, social workers, educators, lawyers, etc. In other words, that this is culturally global, and it doesn't matter whether they are believers or not. If they're going to have experiences, they'll have experiences. They don't have to believe in ETs to have the experiences. It's not about belief. This is about people's experiences. And when you've supported, as I've done, 3,500 plus families and children having these experiences globally, you can't say they're all hallucinating. And the bottom line is that there are many professionals that you would rate as being credible. And I get educators, clinical psychologists, parents writing to me about their children not knowing what to do because of the unusual experiences they have. They can't all be crazy. So the bottom line is, particularly, that I'm very careful with my book as well, is as many of those with credentials people recognize, I've deliberately included them to say, look, this is someone who's a scientist as well as someone who is open to this. This is a doctor, this is a nurse, this is a social worker. All of them are coming out with similar stories. You know, this will never be make believe when you've got such credibility coming in. So for me, it's about honoring people's experiences. Whether or not you want to believe it or not is really immaterial. It's up to you. But these people, it's changing their lives. And we know it changes lives after these experiences. There is the reality. There is the evidence. You don't have a change in your life unless something very profound has occurred in your life.
You're absolutely correct. I certainly agree with what you're saying because I've had my own experience with the Yael rays. Actually, the first experience I've ever had with the beings were Yaels. It was never with reptilians. I'm known as a channeler of Theta Tauri race, but it's the Yaels that I've met first. It's them. And as much as shocking it was for me, they did explain to me, this is normal. We do it as they said all the time. It's agreed on a soul level. There is nothing bad towards the human. Humans often in exchange get surgeries. This is the first time I encountered a mantis. It was a mantis. It was about probably 10 foot tall, and they operated on my heart. And I remember being in an operating bed, fourth density, and basically he stood around. A couple of Yael beings were around, and a big, huge, tall mantis. He had a finger the size of my arm, and I swear to you, Mary, I swear to God, he took his finger and he put it right through the heart. I didn't feel any pain. And he put it right through the heart, and he told me, we're here to fix a valve or something in relation to a valve. And that experience changed me. I mean, I went to a pet shop, and I was like, hey, do you have any mantis as pets? Like, I want a baby one and love one. I felt love. I felt care. I felt compassion. I felt that they were the most largest, most colossal source of unconditional love ever. So I certainly agree with what you're saying. I fully support your work. I fully support your research. And actually, I've done videos on what's called top books. And in the top books, I would feature 15 videos. They're on my YouTube page. And in both videos, your books were featured in it. I firmly believe your research was excellent. Now, what would you say would be one story, one event of a child that you were researching, that you got to the bottom of it, but that really, really shocked you at the supernatural cause that this event took place, or that the child had, or what happened? Like, give me one story that you would say, certainly I'll never forget that story.
Oh gosh, now you put me on the spot. I think one of the most fascinating, because a lot of them are fascinating when they explain where they've been. One of the 8-year-olds told me that she'd been taken and shown a black hole, and also shown the dinosaurs and how there were humans at the same time as the dinosaurs in real time. But she explained that she'd been taken to a planet where she was shown how to levitate and how to use her third eye. And they also showed her genetic engineering that they were doing across species, across planets. And she said, and they've seeded other planets, including in other universes, was one of the things that she told me. A mother was having experiences, but she explained when she's at school that if she's getting information that's inaccurate, her little being is standing there and tells her not to take any notice of it because it's inaccurate. And I said to her, do you ever talk about this to any of your school friends? She said no, because they wouldn't understand. That's one of many, many different stories of one young man telling me I think he was 9, that he was a time traveler and he was us from our future, and that he's come back at this time because he's got something to do here, as part of his soul mandate or whatever. But he explained that some of the ETs had IQs of over 400, which was fascinating, and other details about things that he shouldn't have known. One young man of 10 explained that he came from a planet where he was blue. He's come as a center seed, and he's connecting with the center of this planet so that he can actually help with the pollution. It's his first human life. So he picked a mom, he said, that was had many lives here, so because it was his first. But his main job was to deal with pollution as he connected to the center of the planet. So it's concepts that are way beyond what you would understand from children under the 10 years of age, for example. And there's many, many other stories like that. I mean, it's hard to pick them because so many of them are extraordinary. But one of them, I will say, recently was a young lady telling me she was a hybrid water being. And she drew the water being. And she said, I'm a hybrid, she told her mum. And she said, I'm part water being, part human. And she explained that when she hears music, she not only hears the frequency, but she goes to the source of that frequency. And she goes into the emotions and the psychology of the individual that's creating the music. So she goes right to the absolute source of it. So this is some of the awareness these children have, all of 8 years old, knowing full well she's a hybrid.
That's incredible. That's beautiful. Yes. Such a lovely course of research you went through. These things right there on their own can change someone for the better, I believe. And yeah, the world we live in is not what our school have taught us, as I always say. People ask me all the time, they say, what's one thing you'd say now versus your perspective 10 years ago? Without even getting into the conversation of extraterrestrials, I'm not even going to get into that. I'm just going to tell you, everything I learned in school, everything I learned in religions, they're absolutely wrong. First step, uninstall it all. Then I can start, telling you a few tips here and there. I'll ask you a last question. I have a question from a great friend of mine who is a mother, and her 9-month daughter has been drawing Arcturus and Pleiades star system and so forth. She wishes to know, what would be your definition, Mary, of what is a hybrid child, and what's the difference between that and an indigo child? Would you be able to elaborate?
It's all about frequency, Anthony. The indigos obviously have an indigo frequency. They're warrior type. You've got those that have different frequencies, as that they might be a healer if they're a crystal child or whatever. So each name they're given metaphysically is appropriate to what they've come in with. But what those who are identifying with hybrids have their extraterrestrial DNA more activated, or they've had extra inserts from that particular species, for example. So they may say, I'm part Pleiadian, part human, or part Arcturian, or whatever. What they're really saying is they have more activated Arcturian or Pleiadian DNA activated, or they've had it extra inserted at the moment of conception. And so they relate to that frequency of the Arcturian, or the, or of the Pleiadian, or the, Syrian, or whatever it is, or from Lyra, or whatever. So that's why they say they're a hybrid, because their connection is actually often the star system before their human system, because they relate more to that frequency of that particular star system.
What's one thing, Mary, that drives you? What inspires you? I know you have children. I understand you have family. You have your personal things, human things in this incarnation. Professionally, what drives you to research? What drives you to fly all around the world? And I understand at least of 10, 15 different expos you've done or conferences. I know you have one in 2023 with a great friend of mine, Roderick Martin, and Billy Carson in UK and Manchester in August. And what drives you to do that at your age? What inspires you?
Firstly, truth. I want to know before I die what's true, and who are we? Why are we here? What's it all about? The big questions are one of the things. But the other thing that drives me is the damage that's been done by the lies, by the cover-ups, to not just millions, but billions of people who can't own their own truth because of censorship, because of the way that they're treated. So I would like to see psychology, a new model of psychology that honors all multidimensional experiences. And so we can fully be all that we are, because at the moment, that's the very thing that limits us from being who we really are and how special we really are. So there's the two things, but truth is the major one. I want to know the truth. I want to know all that we should be told and have a right to know as human beings.
You said the word truth. It's funny, just last week with Freddie Silva, we were talking about what's the reason, and I said the only reason I got into this industry and devoted rigorous amount of work because I want to find out the truth, Freddie. And we both giggled, and here you are speaking of the same thing. I admire that. Absolutely. Truth. Yes, we don't get a lot of truth here in our country. We're in the amount of censorship, tyranny. I mean, it's crazy. You can't even I can't even find out what happened in Australia today because they're going to censor everything. So thank God we have private apps, chat apps, WhatsApps, and Telegrams and so forth. But thank you for explaining that. I'll ask you this question. I hope you live a long time, obviously, but after you die, you brought up death, and after you die, Mary, after you pass and go back home, what's one thing you wish to be remembered by?
That I haven't wasted my time, that I've come down to help, and I hope in some small way I've helped my beautiful planet and my beautiful beings of light, and I've made a difference in some small way to humanity.
I think you did, definitely. Not necessarily the books you've written, but I believe tremendous amount of research you've done, which no one's really ever proved you wrong. It's actually impossible to prove statements and research like that wrong because we are multidimensional beings. We just happen to be here, but this isn't our planet, nor were we here first. And a lot of different visitations children have. That's no conspiracy. People got to really get that out of their heads. They sound extremely primitive. It's like Stone Age statements. Children are not making it up. No way, but thank you for telling me that. You'll always be remembered. I'm not sure if I'm going to see you again, maybe in August at that Billy Carson's Forbidden Knowledge conference in Manchester. But if I don't, I'll always remember you as a very classy and elegant woman that's very firm and solid. And as a person that gravitates towards extremely intense, tough energies, I appreciate seeing that. My mother is the same, My mother's got the same energy. It's just very similar to you. She's a lion. She'll survive. Believe me, I always make a joke and saying, you put my mom in Istanbul, she'll find her way back to Canada somehow, So yes, I love the energy you bring forward, and you don't take BS from anybody because you have the research that was done there. What's one message to the audience, whether they're a Canadian audience here in Toronto? I have a lot of American audience. My audience is like my family. I care about them. And what would you wish to tell them in relation to any myth stories, misinformation, or disinformation they heard about hybrid children or hybridization programs? I'll leave it up to you, Mayor, to finalize the show. What would you wish to tell the audience in relation, not just about your work, but hybridization programs that humans are involved, children are involved? What would you say?
Well, I'd say we're all hybrids for a start. So if there's thinking that the hybrids are coming to take over the planet, we've already done it. We did it when we were created. So what's the problem? And secondly, that we're seeing all these wonderful souls now incarnating onto this planet and have been for a number of years. They haven't come in for a waste of time. They've come in to bring their awareness, their understanding, their skills, their wisdom and their knowledge to teach us and to awaken us. So we've got a wonderful future ahead. And I believe it's not too far away. And I've more or less said to my team, make sure I'm around for the finale. Otherwise, I'm not going to be a very happy soul. So they promised me I'm around for the finale. So we'll see. But we've come here because we've all asked to be around for the finale and for a new beginning.
Wonderful. Can you recommend any authors that you would say would help any audience member watching this video on, let's say, regressions, on ancient civilizations, on the true pyramid builders, even extraterrestrial contact? What authors, can you give us a few authors that you would recommend that the audience can research and buy their books? Who would you recommend?
Well, Brad Olson, wonderful gentleman. There's so many hidden archaeology by Dr. Cremo is another one that I'm very fascinated with. The new information coming out from the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute with Ray Hernandez. This new book that's come out, my story's in it as well. A Greater Reality, the New Paradigm of Non-Local Consciousness and Paranormal of the Contact Modalities. This is not just the theory. It is the theory, but it's more than that. It's the stories and accounts as well from highly credible souls in academia that have stepped out the closet and told their truth. But there are so many, I can't really go into. There's so many wonderful books. Sherry Wild tells her wonderful story. There are many on hybrids that are out there now. Meet the Hybrids by Miguel Mondoka and Barbara Lamb is a wonderful one as well. He's written those on disclosure. You've got Alan Steinfeld and his book Contact, where you've got some wonderful accounts in there. There is so much. What is wonderful now, Anthony? There is so much material out there now. So many people are telling their story, coming out with their truth, coming out the space closet, as I call it. And that's where disclosure is really going to happen, not through the Pentagon or anyone else saying, oh, there's a few lights in the sky. We don't know what they are because they're lying toads. The truth is it's going to come from the ground up, from ordinary, everyday people that are saying, this is my truth, this is my story. And there we're going to get the real disclosure. And it's happening from the ground up right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course. I agree with that. We're never going to get disclosure from the governments because it's not in their interest to do that. It's never going to happen. And that's another thing too. And people say you got a harsh tone. Well, not really. I'm telling you reality. And truth hurts. Yeah. Stop waiting for Google to tell you about extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional races that have been involved with us for a long time, just like the ones that live below us, just like the ones that are involved with us. Guys, it's never going to happen. Like, honestly, stop it. Stop the madness. It's never going to happen. Find your own truth. Or as we talked about earlier, enable your own connection to your higher self, or enable your own channeling abilities. Find out your own truth. Stand in your sovereignty with honor, with pride, with courage, with dedication, absolute full transparency, with no fear, no phobias, right? No lack of safety. And that's one of the things when it comes to resistances, a lot of people are afraid to do what you and I talked about earlier, connect to extraterrestrials. Well, you cannot have a resistance of safety. You already are safe. You're surrounded by a lot of different beings you can't see for a reason. And then you're surrounded by your soul layers for a reason to keep you safe. So keep connecting. Absolutely, yes. I love the fact that you promote extraterrestrial contact. Some people do not. They say, well, we don't know who they are. They're all evil. They're all bad. They all kill humans, abduct our children, and the rest of the disinformation. I disagree with these people. I'll never resonate with these people. They're fear mongers. So I appreciate you certainly promoting safe, benevolent, or neutral extraterrestrial contact, because why not? Why should we not benefit from what they have to offer or teach us? We're students, they're instructors. Hey, and that's how I say it too. I said, teach me, tutor me, just tell me once, and I'll do the rest. Yeah.
What I'd like to say is what an 8-year-old said to her mother one day: "Mummy, we are the aliens." But the truth is that we all have origins in the stars, and we've just incarnated into being human. But that doesn't stop us connecting to our star origins that can be not just in this universe, but in other universes as well, because that's what we're hearing, aren't we? I feel like I'm a Pleiadian, or I feel like I've come from Sirius or whatever. We are the aliens. So let's get over the fact that, that there's not an us and them. We are them. So once we realize that as a soul, we're connected to all of them, because we're all of the same consciousness ultimately, because we're all from the same source. So stop separating it out and discriminating, because it's pointless. If you're really going to work out who you are, then you'll realize your soul has been all over the place. So
Yes, the point of incarnation. You're absolutely right. This child is correct. And again, too, who are we to be judging fifth, sixth density extraterrestrial advanced civilizations? We're going to judge them? Come on. We should be grateful they're even talking to us. But this child is right. I'd like to bring one more example about a child you told me about. And it's a child, from my memory, his name is Arthur, about 10, 11 years old. He was equipped, downloaded, or given a variety of different musical talents, musical abilities. I believe in 2019, you've said that this child has even demonstrated or shown you, and his mother is perhaps in Australia, examples of the music, examples of these tones, some that have to do with our DNA. I found that story to be fascinating. I've actually explained that a few times. Can you elaborate for the audience about this child that you've investigated and gotten to know?
Yeah. His a real name is Matthew. Am I allowed to say that now? Matthew's now a teenager, but when he was about 11, he had an experience where he was taken up on board a spacecraft, and he talked about the beings that were there, and he explained that they were using different frequencies and different tones, and they were something to do with altering his DNA. After that, he found himself saying to his mother, "I need to go on the piano and play these different tunes." And one of them was decoding DNA. One was called Arrival. I've forgotten the name of all. It was about 5 different songs, he called them. And they were completely channeled by him. And he was told that they were like a package for helping people activate, decode, and expand their awareness. And so he got, I think, 4 of the songs were in the space of a few days, and his mother recorded all of them. And the most important one that I saw was the one that was decoding DNA. But he was aware of the fact that that had happened on board craft as well, that they were doing something to his DNA through frequency. So it was all tied together. And what was fascinating from a musical perspective, I got another musician that plays, who's very intuitive. She's a wonderful violinist. She's a celebrated violinist. And she explained that he was a genius, that this was genius. This wasn't just any old kind of music, that what he was playing was actually, Juliana Oka is the name. She lives in California, and she's a wonderful violinist. And she said, I had the same experiences in Japan as Matthew had when he was, at 11, exactly the same feeling of bringing in this information and then being exhausted afterwards because of the frequencies and what have you. So there's someone who validated his experiences because of their own. And as you know, Anthony, I try as much as possible to get any extra data or validation to any of the information to see if anyone else has had similar experiences. And she said, absolutely, it was the same for her.
Beautiful. And what was the name of that book that you just told me about earlier, that your portion in the book will be also published or is already published? Can you tell us again one more time? Can you put up the book to the camera so we can see it?
It's called A Greater Reality. The New Paradigm of Non-Local Consciousness, the Paranormal and Contact Modalities, Volume 2. That's how thick it is. And it's Ray Hernandez Dr. Rudy Shield, Dr. John Clamo, Dr. Michael Grosso, PhD, and Dr. Jeffrey Long as well. And that's the book. I can send you the cover of it as well.
And I'll leave you with one last question of the show. 2023. What do you wish to share with me? What do you wish to share with our audience? What are some of the things you're working on? Where are some of the places you're going to be? And where can we see more of Mary Rodwell at 2023?
Well, there's a lot there. As you know, I'm going to be at the Awakening Expo in Manchester in August next year. I'm also going to be in the Paradigm Shift here in the Gold Coast at the end of May. I've done a lot of I'm doing a lot of online conferences, so that's not really. I will promote that through my Facebook as and when I do those kinds of things as well. So that's roughly where I'm traveling to at the moment. That changes, as you know, as you get different information through. I'm looking at a lot more of the past life connections to contact, because I've discovered that many people that are having contact in this life have had it in other lifetimes. And so I'm exploring more of those kinds of stories, some connected to Atlantis, Lemuria, and other significant times in our history. So in other words, it's taking it to that other level of soul journey, and rattling the cage a little bit to those that are even struggling with what we're talking about. I'm just saying, let's go to past lives now, shall we, and see where the connection is. And I've covered a couple of stories like that. One of them to do with the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, where the gentleman's had lots of communication with the Sasquatch, which he says are another star being. They have the same messages as a lot of the other star beings like Pleiadians and whatever, and very deep connection to them in his communication. And we wanted to find out why he's so drawn to the Sasquatch. And we discovered he had 3 past lives, the Sasquatch, including his wife, Brian Bland, that is, and Pork and Bean Show, if you want to know that. So I'm going now to that next level of saying, okay, so why is this happening in this reality at this time? Where is it in your soul history? So just, breaking open more and more of those constraints to our reality. And I say to people, if you find something makes you uncomfortable and part of you is reluctant to look at it, that's when you need to look at it, because there's a part of you challenging you to grow.
So in conclusion, Mary, I thank you for being with us here at the Canadian Awareness Podcast, and I send you my regards, warmest regards from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Anthony, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you. And thank you for all the beautiful work that you're doing as well, because it's through your work of putting this information out that so many, countless people are supported and helped. So honor to you too. Thank you.
I appreciate that coming of you. Of course, yes, I'm an extremely proud channeler. Thank you very much for the kind words. It'll stay with me. I appreciate that. Thank you. And have yourself a wonderful day, Mary.
Okay. Bye-bye, Anthony.
And there we have Mary Rodwell. Mary, thank you very much for being with us this evening here at the Canadian Awareness Podcast. We and I and all of us here, we very much appreciate it. For more information on Mary, please take a look at her website, the Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, or ACERN for short. Also, Mary is on Facebook under Mary Rodwell, and tremendous amount of information she puts on her pages, a lot of different reposts, a lot of different posts that she puts up that her colleagues bring forward to her page. So great page to learn a lot of different things that Mary specializes in, and that has been specializing over all of these years. And she's been in this industry way along. I've even came into this industry, and a great author like Mary cannot be missed. Her books speaks for themselves. The New Human and another book named Awakening, both available on Amazon. Again, for more information on Mary, please take a look at her website, Australian Close Encounter Resource Network. Otherwise, thank you very much for being with us this evening, and we'll see you all in the next episode of Canadian Awareness Podcast right here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Thank you and good night.